What if I told you that everything we thought we knew about Avengers Doomsday has just been turned on its head? A brand new leak suggests something so wild, so game-changing that it completely reframes Dr. Doom's entire arc in the MCU. I'm talking about a storyline where Doom's deepest motivation isn't just conquest or revenge or multiversal domination, it's family. And here's the craziest part. This leak points to Franklin Richards possibly being Doom's own son. That one idea alone redefines not only the Fantastic Four's introduction, but also how the Avengers Saga might conclude in the biggest Marvel event we've ever seen. Welcome back to MovieCast. I'm your host, Liam Harrison, and today I'm going to break this down piece by piece, theory by theory, in a way that makes sense of Doom's actions, Cap's choices, and the bigger Secret Wars picture Marvel is building. So strap in, because I think this new information completely changes how we should view Avengers Doomsday. Now, let me start with the core claim. Steve Rogers, by going back in time to live with Peggy Carter, accidentally caused an incursion that destroyed Victor Von Doom's timeline and family. If that's true, it flips Steve's ending in Endgame from bittersweet and heartwarming into one of the most devastating mistakes in the multiverse. That quiet choice to settle down in another reality doesn't just affect his own life, it cascades across timelines, igniting a tragedy that shapes Doom into the figure we'll see in Doomsday. And honestly, this makes sense. The Multiverse Saga has been setting up the rules of incursion since Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. If two universes collide because someone tampered with their destiny, entire realities collapse. So now imagine Doom, one of Marvel's most brilliant and dangerous minds, surviving such a collapse but losing everyone he loved in the process. His rage, his obsession, his cold determination. They suddenly feel less like villain cliches and more like the grief-fueled mission of a man who sees himself as wronged by destiny itself. But here's where it gets even more interesting. We've been led to believe that Doom shows up in the Fantastic Four's post-credit scene as this ominous presence, looming with menace and intent. But what if, instead of just hunting power, Doom was searching for someone very specific, Sue Storm and Franklin Richards? The comics already give us a template for this. In Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars run, Doom reshapes reality itself and literally makes Reed Richards' family his own. He doesn't just seize power, he rewrites the most intimate bonds of family to heal his own wounds. In that storyline, Sue is his wife, Franklin is his son, and the Richards family belongs to Doom. If Marvel is pulling inspiration from that arc, and it seems like they absolutely are, then that post-credit scene takes on a completely different meaning. Doom kneeling before Franklin? That's not just intimidation. That's recognition. That's a father, seeing the child he lost in another world. And I need to pause here because this is where the emotional weight of the theory really hits. Doom isn't just some mustache-twirling overlord trying to bend worlds to his will. He's a man whose family was ripped away because of an incursion triggered by Steve Rogers' choice. Think about that. Cap finally decides to live a life for himself, something fans have wanted for years, and it spirals into the destruction of another man's reality. And not just any man, Victor Von Doom, who now has the motivation to wage war on the Avengers themselves. From Doom's perspective, Steve isn't a hero at all. He's the murderer of his wife and child. That puts a moral spin on this story that makes it way darker, way more compelling, and honestly, way more tragic. I think Marvel knows exactly what they're doing here by making Doom sympathetic. They raise the stakes of Doomsday beyond anything we've seen before. This isn't Thanos' balance or Kang's conquer all. This is personal. Now, the question that immediately comes up is this: how did Doom survive an incursion if his family didn't? That's one of the great mysteries we still don't have an answer for. Did he build a machine? Did he stumble upon a multiversal refuge like Battleworld before it even existed? Or was there a darker, more tragic reason, like he had to choose between saving himself and saving them? The leak doesn't spell that part out, but if I had to guess, I'd say Marvel is saving that reveal for the opening act of Avengers Doomsday. Because whatever the explanation is, it's going to define his psychology. A man who blames another hero for destroying his family is already compelling, but a man who blames himself because he couldn't save them? That's the kind of guilt that twists into obsession. That's the kind of guilt that drives someone to remake the entire universe just to undo one moment of loss. Let's circle back to Franklin Richards for a second, because he's the true X factor here. In the comics, Franklin is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe. His ability to warp reality is essentially godlike. So imagine Doom, desperate to recreate the life he lost, realizing that Franklin isn't just his son in another timeline, but also the key to rebuilding his family. Suddenly, Franklin isn't just a child to protect, he's the ultimate weapon. That's why I believe Doom isn't simply after Reed Richards, or the Fantastic Four, or even the Avengers. He's after Franklin, because Franklin represents both Doom's grief and his hope, his sorrow and his salvation. And here's the kicker. If Franklin is indeed his son in Doom's original timeline, then Doom's obsession with him is no longer about manipulation. It's about reclaiming blood. And that makes the coming conflict way more intimate, way more heartbreaking. Of course, this doesn't just affect Doom, it reshapes Reed Richards' role in the story too. Reed has always been Doom's intellectual rival, but now the rivalry becomes personal on another level. Imagine Reed realizing that Doom doesn't just want to destroy him out of jealousy. Doom wants to take his family, because in Doom's mind, that family was his first. That's chilling. And it creates a dynamic where Reed is fighting not only for his world, but for his wife and his son, against someone who truly believes they belong to him. That's far scarier than Kang's cold calculations. This is primal. This is about belonging, love, and loss. And if Marvel plays this out the way the leaks suggest, Reed Richards may find himself in the most painful fight of his life, not against Doom's power, but against Doom's grief-driven conviction. Now, I want to touch on how Steve Rogers ties back into this, because I think that's where Marvel is being really clever. Even though Chris Evans has supposedly retired from the MCU, leaks keep hinting that Steve Rogers' legacy will echo into Doomsday. If Doom's hatred is truly rooted in Steve's decision, then Cap becomes the catalyst for the entire film, even if he's not physically present. That's poetic storytelling, and it also gives Marvel an excuse to potentially bring Evans back for at least a cameo. Imagine the emotional weight of Doom confronting Steve, not with some grand villain speech, but with raw fury. Because of you, my family is gone. That would hit harder than any energy blast or reality warp. It would force Steve to face the consequences of his choice in Endgame in a way that redefines his character for fans. And honestly, I think that's exactly the kind of gut punch Marvel wants to deliver. So let's push this theory forward, because if Doom's motivation is grounded in loss and grief, the natural question becomes, how far is he willing to go to fix it? And here's where the concept of Battleworld comes crashing into the MCU. In the comics, Battleworld is the stitched together patchwork of realities that Doom rules as a god after the multiverse collapses. It's terrifying and awe-inspiring at the same time because it represents the death of infinite universes, but also the survival of one, crafted by Doom's hand. Now, if Franklin Richards really is Doom's son in another timeline, then Battleworld isn't just a throne for Doom to sit upon. It's his desperate attempt to build a world where his family is whole again. Every tower, every continent, every stitched piece of reality would just be scaffolding for the home he lost. And honestly, that makes the potential creation of Battleworld in Avengers Doomsday more emotional than it ever was in the comics. Instead of simply playing God, Doom is rewriting existence for love. But here's the catch, and this is where Marvel thrives: love doesn't automatically equal heroism. Doom's love is twisted by loss, warped by ego, and sharpened by jealousy. He doesn't want to share that family with Reed Richards. He doesn't want to honor the memory of his real wife and child. He wants to impose his will on reality itself until Sue Storm and Franklin believe they were always his. That's not just grief, that's obsession. And when obsession is paired with genius-level intellect and near-limitless magical power, you get a villain who's scarier than Kang and more tragic than Thanos. Because unlike those two, Doom's not trying to wipe out half the universe or create a dynasty. He's just trying to get back what was taken from him. And if Steve Rogers' choice in Endgame is the root of that loss, then Doom's anger isn't going to burn out. It's going to expand like wildfire until it consumes every Avenger standing in his way. Now, let's talk about how this intersects with the Avengers themselves, because Doomsday is not just a Fantastic Four story. It's being billed as the biggest crossover since Endgame, and that means every surviving hero has a role to play. What makes Doom such a terrifying adversary for them is that he isn't just threatening the multiverse in abstract terms, he's threatening them with a weapon they can't fight: memory. If Doom succeeds in creating Battleworld, he doesn't just bring back his family. He rewrites everyone else's history too. Imagine an Avenger waking up in Battleworld convinced they've always been Doom's soldier. Imagine Sue Storm waking up as Doom's wife with no recollection of Reed Richards. That's the nightmare scenario. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that Doom's weapon isn't his armor, his intellect, or even Franklin Richards. His weapon is belief. Because if you believe the lie of Battleworld, then Doom has already won. And this is where Franklin's role becomes even more complex. Franklin has the power to create realities, but he's still just a kid. If Doom manipulates him, he doesn't need to force the world to bend. Franklin will do it for him. That sets up a heartbreaking dynamic. Reed Richards fighting to protect his son, while Doom whispers in Franklin's ear that Reed isn't really his father, that Doom is. It's psychological warfare mixed with cosmic stakes. And honestly, this is where Marvel could deliver one of the most devastating father-son conflicts ever put on screen. Because if Franklin starts to believe Doom, if he starts to think that Doom is the parent who truly understands him, then Reed is fighting not just for the multiverse, but for his child's heart. And that's the kind of emotional drama that elevates a superhero movie from spectacle to tragedy. But here's the wrinkle Marvel might explore. What if Franklin isn't just a weapon, but also the only one who can stop Doom? In the comics, Franklin has the potential to reshape universes on his own terms. So what if the key to defeating Doom isn't another Avenger punching him into the dirt, but Franklin realizing the truth and rejecting Doom's influence? That would be devastating for Doom, because it would mean the one person he's been trying to reclaim, the one person he's been willing to destroy worlds for, chooses to walk away from him. And you can already picture that scene. Doom on his knees, begging Franklin to see him as his father, only for Franklin to whisper, "You're not my dad." That's not just a defeat, that's emotional annihilation. And for a villain like Doom who thrives on pride, that kind of rejection would cut deeper than any blade. Still, we can't ignore the role Steve Rogers plays in all of this. Even if he doesn't physically appear until late in the movie, or maybe only in flashbacks, his presence lingers over every choice. Because in Doom's mind, Steve is the original sin. Steve is the man who broke the multiverse. And that sets up something fascinating for the Avengers themselves. They've spent years idolizing Cap, building their identity around his leadership, his sacrifice, his integrity. But now, Imagine Doom standing before them, laying out his argument. Your beloved Captain America destroyed my world. How would they respond? Would they dismiss it as villainous manipulation, or would that seed of doubt creep in? Did Steve's choice in Endgame have consequences they never considered? That's a moral dilemma that fractures teams, and fractured teams are the perfect playground for Doom to exploit. I think the most chilling possibility is this. Doom doesn't just want to kill Steve. That would be too simple. He wants Steve to understand. He wants Steve to realize the weight of his actions, to feel the same grief Doom carries every day. And if Marvel really goes down that path, then Chris Evans' return isn't just a cameo, it's a reckoning. Picture Doom dragging Steve into Battleworld, forcing him to walk through the ruins of his incursion-ravaged timeline, forcing him to see the bodies of Doom's family, forcing him to admit that his personal happiness with Peggy cost someone else everything. That would be one of the darkest, most powerful moments in the entire MCU. And honestly, I think Marvel is bold enough to do it. Because they know that fans don't just want another big fight, they want consequences. And Doom is the embodiment of consequence. So where does this leave the Avengers? Well, it puts them in the impossible position of fighting someone who might not be entirely wrong. Doom's methods are brutal. His goals are selfish, but his pain is real, and that's what makes him dangerous. Heroes fight villains who want power. They don't know how to fight villains who want love. Because how do you tell a grieving father that he doesn't deserve a second chance? How do you justify your own choices when his loss is staring you in the face? That's the moral complexity Doomsday has the potential to bring to the table. And in my opinion, if Marvel nails this balance, if they make Doom as sympathetic as he is terrifying, then he could easily surpass Thanos as the greatest MCU villain we've ever seen. Not because he's stronger, but because he's more human. So let's imagine what happens when Doom finally acts on this obsession. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, maybe even some multiversal allies are scrambling to stop incursions, but Doom's playing a different game. He's not trying to prevent destruction, he's trying to harness it. The leaks suggest Doom uses the chaos of colliding realities as raw material, carving out pieces of dying universes to construct Battleworld. And that idea is terrifying because it means every failure the Avengers endure, every world that collapses becomes another brick in Doom's throne. Picture it. Fragments of Wakanda floating beside shattered Asgard, remnants of Xandar stitched next to ruins of Sokovia, a patchwork planet, grotesque in its beauty, and Doom standing over it not as a tyrant but as a creator. That's the scale Marvel might give us, a world literally built from loss, where Doom feels justified because in his eyes, destruction is only fuel for rebirth. But Battleworld isn't just scenery, it's a weapon of manipulation. By stitching together fragments of timelines, Doom can place people in environments that confuse and break them. Imagine an Avenger waking up to find a version of their lost loved one alive again, only to realize they're trapped in Doom's fabricated reality. Think about Wanda Maximoff if she appears, being confronted with a version of her children. Think about Tony Stark's daughter, Morgan, alive in some Battleworld corner. These illusions don't need to be illusions. They're real fragments, plucked from destroyed timelines, given new context by Doom's hand. That means every hero on Battleworld faces the most painful test imaginable. Can they fight for truth when everything they've ever wanted is right in front of them? That's not just a physical battle. That's psychological warfare on a scale no Avenger has ever faced. And Franklin Richards, with his reality-bending potential, becomes the keystone that makes this nightmare possible. Now here's the genius of Doom's plan. He doesn't need to beat the Avengers in combat. He just needs them to surrender to Battleworld. If he convinces them this is their reality, then they stop fighting. And if Franklin believes him, if Franklin accepts Doom as his father, then Doom's victory is absolute. That's why I think Act 3 of Doomsday is going to lean heavily into fractured loyalties. Some heroes will resist Doom outright, but others will waver. Imagine Sam Wilson as Captain America, standing against Doom, while another Avenger hesitates because they've been offered a life where their losses never happened. This tension splits the team, not because they disagree on tactics, but because they disagree on what's real. And that's exactly what Doom wants. A fractured opposition is no opposition at all. This is also where Reed Richards becomes the emotional center of the fight. Because for him, this isn't just a war against Doom, it's a rescue mission for his son. Reed knows Franklin's power makes him vulnerable, and Doom knows how to exploit that vulnerability. Doom won't threaten Franklin with violence. He'll drown him in affection, in promises, in carefully chosen truths about the family they might have shared. And if Franklin begins to waver, Reed faces the nightmare of every parent, losing your child not to death, but to someone else's influence. And this isn't just any influence, this is Victor Von Doom, his oldest rival, his most dangerous adversary, trying to claim the very heart of his family. That's gut-wrenching. And if Marvel leans into it, it transforms Doom from a tyrant into something even scarier, a rival father. So how do the Avengers even fight back against something like this? Punching Doom won't stop him. Destroying Battleworld won't end the illusion. The only way forward is to confront the truth. And this is where Steve Rogers' shadow looms large again. If Doom's rage is rooted in Steve's choice, then the Avengers have to grapple with the reality that their greatest leader might also be their greatest mistake. And I think this is where Marvel will twist the knife. Because for all of Steve's heroism, for all of his nobility, he still chose himself in the end. He chose Peggy, and in doing so, he doomed another universe. That doesn't erase his heroism, but it complicates it in a way that no one, not even Steve, can deny. And when Doom hurls that truth in their faces, the Avengers can't refute it. They can only decide whether Steve's mistake defines them or whether they can still rise above it. And here's where the cracks begin to show in Doom himself. For all his genius, all his power, Doom is still a man defined by loss. His obsession with Franklin, his hatred for Steve, his manipulation of Battleworld, all of it comes from one wound that never healed. And that's where the Avengers can win, not by overpowering him, but by outlasting him. Because Doom's vision of Battleworld is fragile. It relies on Franklin's belief, on the hero's surrender, on the illusion holding together. The moment someone rejects it, the cracks widen. And when those cracks spread, Doom's entire empire begins to fall apart. That's the beauty of this setup. Doom isn't defeated by strength. He's defeated by clarity. The truth is stronger than any illusion, and the moment Franklin sees it, Doom's dream collapses. That's why I think the climax of Doomsday won't be a massive battle in the traditional sense. It'll be a battle of wills, of identities, of belief. But before we get to that climax, let's imagine how Doom tries to tighten his grip. He's not stupid. He knows the Avengers are resilient. So he escalates. He reshapes Battleworld to force them into confrontations they can't win. Imagine Thor trapped in a fragment of Asgard, forced to relive Ragnarok again and again. Imagine Peter Parker confronted with a world where Uncle Ben never died, but at the cost of forgetting everything else. Imagine Sam Wilson given the chance to stand beside Steve forever, never needing to lead on his own. These aren't temptations, they're traps. Doom doesn't need to fight them. He just needs them to choose comfort over truth. And the cruel genius of Doom is that comfort looks a lot like victory. If the Avengers accept these worlds, Battleworld becomes reality. And in that reality, Doom finally has what he's always wanted, his family, restored. But that's where the Avengers' true strength shines through. They're not heroes because they win fights. They're heroes because they endure loss and keep going. Thor rejects the false Asgard because he knows his people live on through him. Peter rejects the chance to undo Uncle Ben's death because responsibility defines him. Sam rejects the illusion of Steve's presence because he knows he has to carry the shield alone. Each act of rejection is an act of truth, and each act of truth tears another hole in Battleworld's fabric. And when those holes widen, Franklin sees them too. He realizes that Doom's world isn't built on love, it's built on lies. That's the turning point, the moment when Franklin has to decide who he is. And that decision is the linchpin of the entire movie. Because if Franklin chooses Doom, the Avengers lose. If he chooses Reed, Doom's empire crumbles. Now we've reached the tipping point. Battleworld is alive, stitched together from fragments of infinite destruction, and Doom sits at the center as both king and grieving father. For him, this isn't a throne of conquest. It's a cradle of memory. Every piece of his world is another shard of what he lost. But here's where things take a turn. The Avengers, fractured and broken by the illusions Doom has crafted, begin to realize that they can't fight this world the way they've fought villains before. Punches and lasers won't fix reality itself. What they need is clarity. The strength to remember who they are when everything around them is designed to make them forget. And that's when the real battle begins, not against Doom's armor or his magic, but against his narrative. Doom wants them to believe this patchwork is reality. The Avengers' only hope is to reject it, no matter how much it hurts. For Reed Richards, the pain cuts deepest. Franklin is slipping further under Doom's sway, listening as Victor whispers promises of a life where they were always together. Doom isn't lying, at least not entirely. In another timeline, Sue Storm was indeed his partner. Franklin was indeed his child. That partial truth is what makes the manipulation so potent. Franklin can feel the resonance of it in his very being, and the idea of embracing Doom as his father becomes harder to resist. Reed realizes he can't simply fight Doom for Franklin's loyalty. He has to remind his son of who he is and of the bond they've already built. This becomes the emotional centerpiece of the final act. Reed versus Doom, not as rivals in intellect, but as rivals in fatherhood. And honestly, I think Marvel is bold enough to lean into this. Not a battle of fists, but a battle for Franklin's heart. Meanwhile, the Avengers face their own trials. Each one is tempted by Battleworld in different ways. Sam Wilson sees a version of Steve still alive, still leading, and has to decide whether to step out of his shadow or remain forever second to him. Thor is confronted with a fragment of Asgard before Ragnarok, with Odin still alive. Peter Parker finds Aunt May alive again, offering him a home free of guilt. These are not illusions. They are real alternate pieces stitched into Doom's reality. And resisting them feels like resisting life itself. But this is where the Avengers' true heroism shines through. It's not their powers that save them. It's their ability to choose truth over comfort. One by one, they break through Doom's illusions, each act of defiance weakening Battleworld itself. Because Battleworld isn't just built from fragments. It's sustained by belief. The moment belief fractures, the seams begin to unravel. Steve Rogers, though, is the fulcrum of this conflict. Whether he physically appears in the film or exists only as Doom's accusation, his presence dominates the battlefield. Doom forces Steve to witness the destruction of his original timeline, laying the guilt bare. And here's the twist I think Marvel might deliver. Steve doesn't deny it. He admits his choice was selfish. He admits he wanted a life with Peggy, even if it cost others. But then, he says something Doom doesn't expect. Something only Steve Rogers could say. He admits that he too has to live with the weight of that decision, and that Doom's pain is real. But Steve refuses to let grief justify tyranny. This doesn't absolve him. It condemns him. But it also defines him. Because Steve's greatest strength has never been his shield. It's his willingness to take responsibility. And in that moment, Doom sees the one thing he cannot bear. A man who accepts guilt without letting it consume him. This revelation cracks Doom's resolve, but it's Franklin's choice that shatters it. For all of Doom's power, all of his intellect, he cannot force Franklin to love him. And as Franklin looks between Reed and Doom, he sees the difference. Doom wants a son to heal his pain. Reed loves his son for who he already is. That difference is everything. And when Franklin finally rejects Doom, when he chooses Reed, the very foundation of Battleworld collapses. Because without Franklin's subconscious belief sustaining it, the patchwork reality begins to tear apart. Fragments crumble, illusions shatter, and Doom's carefully constructed dream dissolves around him. In that moment, we don't see the God Emperor. We see the man. A father kneeling in the ruins of his own obsession, watching the family he tried to steal slip through his fingers. But Doom isn't just defeated, he's exposed. The Avengers don't kill him, because killing him would only prove his point about cruelty and loss. Instead, they let him live with the weight of his failure. That's the cruelest punishment of all for someone like Victor Von Doom. To know that even with godlike power, he couldn't reclaim what he lost. And here's the brilliance of that ending. It doesn't erase his humanity. Doom isn't a monster. He's a man broken by grief, blinded by obsession, undone not by the Avengers' fists, but by the one truth he refused to face. His family is gone, and no amount of stolen timelines can change that. It's tragic. It's haunting, and it sets him up as a figure who could return, not as a simple villain, but as one of Marvel's most layered characters. As the dust settles, the Avengers reflect on what they've endured. They didn't just save the multiverse from collapse, they reaffirmed their identities in the face of illusion. Sam Wilson proves he can stand as Captain America, not because Steve isn't there, but because Steve's legacy doesn't define him. Thor accepts that Asgard is gone, but that his people live on through him. Peter Parker understands that grief is part of responsibility, and that carrying it makes him who he is. These quiet moments of clarity are the true victory because they remind us that heroes are not defined by what they gain, but by what they choose to endure. And that theme runs through the entire film. Doom wanted to rewrite reality to escape pain. The Avengers accepted pain to protect reality. That contrast is the heart of Avengers Doomsday. And so we close with the multiverse stabilized, at least for now, but with scars that won't heal easily. Doom has been broken but not destroyed. Franklin has embraced his true family, and Steve Rogers' choice has been reframed forever. What once seemed like a happy ending now carries the weight of unintended tragedy. And that complexity makes the story richer, not weaker. Because Marvel has shown us something bold. Even the best heroes make choices with consequences, and even the worst villains can be driven by love. That's the kind of storytelling that lingers, the kind that sparks debate long after the credits roll. And honestly, if these leaks are even halfway true, Avengers Doomsday might not just be another Marvel blockbuster, it could be the most emotionally layered film in the entire MCU. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching this breakdown here on MovieCast. I'm Liam Harrison. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this deep dive. And check out YouTube's new hype option to boost the video for free if you want to show support. And if you'd like to directly support our work, please consider using the Super Thanks option. Every bit helps, and a $20 shout of support goes a long way in keeping these breakdowns coming. Until next time, keep questioning the details because the theories are just getting started.